I've been very fortunate to have done my fieldwork in ELL classrooms for the last 2 semesters. Um, and both the intermediate ELL classrooms and the introductory ELL classrooms. Um, every class is an ELL class full of about 20 students, so they're all non-native English speakers. In the introductory ELL class, the students vary a lot in their English skills. Some of them are able to communicate verbally very well. Others are even in the silent period or have very minimal English skills. Classwork and homework in that class include echo reading, where they focus on making English sounds, reading children's books and testing for comprehension, practicing verb conjugation, and utilizing new vocabulary, all things like that. The intermediate ELL classroom does similar things, but they also focus more on perfecting their English skills. At this point, most of the students are really able to hold a conversation in English and have good verbal skills in that way. But they are really focusing on using English morphology, perfecting their grammar, and then they also are learning how to transfer their English skills to academic purposes. So they really drill reading and writing in that intermediate class. The teacher is highly effective. She is an English language learner herself and is able to relate with the students in that way. She also speaks a little bit of Spanish. So one thing that I've noticed is that she is able to offer her classroom instruction in English, but then is able to help with her the majority of her students are Spanish speakers as their L1, so she's able to, classroom manage in Spanish, please sit up and will you please stop talking sort of thing in Spanish, but then able to give her instruction in English, which I think was interesting. As far as concrete examples, I was lucky enough to participate in a writing workshop one of the days that I went and visited. And obtained a sticky note with some writing from the introductory ELL classroom. This student is a Spanish speaker natively, and I can show you his writing sample here. So a couple things about it. First of all, the context. He's talking about the entire class is writing a full academic paper focused on whether or not we should use the scientific findings of Dr. Joseph Mengele, his human experiments on Holocaust prisoners. And so you can see here that he writes that scientists should not do experiment. It could continue. People died if they do the same thing. First of all, there are lots of spelling errors. And rather than the plural scientists, he used the singular and missed that plural morphology there. Also, he missed the T at the end of experiment. That could be just the simplification of that final consonant cluster in probably the way he speaks it and or the way he hears it. Then there's that continue where he spelled continue wrong, but if you look really closely, he spelled it correctly, but then erased it in favor of this incorrect spelling. So my guess is he probably just couldn't remember which ordering the letters went in. Also, the only reason I think why he spelled scientist correctly is because it was written on the board. So my guess is he just copied what was written on the board there for that one. And then finally, he spelled thing wrong and used the voiceless K instead of the G in that instance. Syntactically, what's interesting about this is, first of all, that he uses can, could, and uses those modals twice. But also, this sentence is syntactically very ill-formed, that it can, could continue, people died. What he's trying to say in this is that if people continued to do human experiments, more people would probably die. And so it's interesting that he recognizes the lexical words. He knows what continue means, he knows what people means, and what died means. So he puts those words together, but he doesn't know how to put them together, what order they go in, or what functional words he can put in order to make the sentence syntactically well formed. So I thought that was a really great example of him knowing the words to use, but not knowing how to use them. As far as what I did to correct it, in this particular instance, the focus of the assignment was on writing this academic paper. And so I actually corrected him more on tailoring his argument closer to the question. He was saying we shouldn't continue to do human experiments. And I said, that's great, but what you should be focusing on is the question is whether or not you should use the findings of human experiments that have already been done. So in that case, because I understood what he was saying and I understood what he was trying to convey in his writing, instead I focused on his writing skills and being able to comprehend and create a claim based on a question. That was what I focused on rather than his language. If the purpose of the assignment was different, then perhaps I would have corrected him more specifically on the language he used. As far as verbal skills, one thing was I had a student talk to me and he said, on the year 1999, and I said, that's great, but I would use the word in 1999. And, then he asked me, well, what's the difference between in and on? And I, gave him an example where I put my hand on top of his binder and then I put my hand inside his binder and explained it to him that way. And he was fine with that answer. But it got me thinking of why we use different prepositions when we do, where we can say in 1999, but we say on Monday. And why do we use those? Or am I sick to my stomach? Am I sick at my stomach? Those sort of things. And they don't really have clear semantical purposes, I think, which was interesting. And I wish I could have given him a better answer for why it was in 1999, but not on 1999. And then finally, as a last example, I was helping a student who had very, very little English skill, and he was required to write an academic paper on a poem, on his opinions of the poem. And he didn't really understand the poem, and he couldn't really type the paper in the first place. And so I did a lot of trying to, what did you think of this sentence? Do you know what this word means? And things like that. And finally, he just looked at me and said, I know understand me's from Argentina. So just talking about that first, he used the wrong negation, right? I know understand, and also missed that D again with the consonant clusters on understand. And then finally, he used the contraction correct, but he used the wrong forms of each word in he meant to say I'm from Argentina, but instead he said me's, me being the accusative rather than the nominative, and then using is instead of am, and the wrong verb agreement in that way. So, yeah.